the Department of,
Sorry, forgot
nope,
to
you're
record.
fine. I come to you from the Department of Education and the school finance team. I'm an account analyst lead. I've been with the department for just about 5-6 years. I took a little bit of a hiatus and I was working with a student information system vendor for a little bit, but I came back and I have my team who actually are in this meeting, in this call as well. So I brought some of my friends along. We've got a few new account analysts. So if you've had the pleasure of talking to somebody from school finance within ADE, likely you're talking to an account analyst. So we've got Barb Micklin, who's been with us for about 4 years now. Roxanne Leon, who's been with us for 3-4 years, but with the agency a little bit longer. Claudia Galvan is new to us, and then Kayla Smith, also new to us, like less than a year. But if you ask them, they'll tell you that it feels like it's a bit longer. School finance years and days seem like dog years sometimes because it gets a little rough. And then I've got the Director of Operations Support, Irene Garcia Hobbs, joining us as well. And I just wanted to have them join us so that they could kind of hear the questions that are being asked from the field and really have an opportunity to listen as well, just because we've got some new people. And for us in school finance, transportation is a once-a-year thing. And even though I've been with the department for a little bit, there's always a curveball every year that gets thrown at me where I'm like, geez, that's a really unique situation there. So as Jason was saying, I'll take questions, absolutely, but given that this year is a little bit different, actually a lot different, we'll see what kind of questions I'll be able to actually answer. So
yeah, let's not beat up on her. I know that she probably doesn't have a lot of answers, but hopefully whatever presentation you have will kind of get some of that information out in front of folks already.
Yeah, and absolutely, I welcome the questions because that is one of the things with transportation, being that it is a once-a-year thing for us. Sometimes obviously we don't know what we don't know, and it's definitely an opportunity for us as an agency to hear you and provide additional guidance if it's a question that's kind of being asked across the board. It's super important to us to be able to provide clear guidance, and if we've released something and it doesn't make sense, just because we're so far removed sometimes, I feel, then opportunities like these are what we need. So if you have questions, even if you're like, she's not going to know the answer, certainly ask it. And I'll be honest with you, like, no, I don't have it, but I'll make sure that your questions do get to the right people. So please ask the questions, ask away. You're right.
Make sure to use the comment box down below, because what that can do is we'll capture all of the questions and dialogue, and we can send that back to Monica so her and her team can work on that stuff. So even though we encourage the verbal conversation, if you do want to just type it in there, and we can capture that after the fact for her and her team.
So I'll go ahead and get started. So this presentation, let me go ahead and see if I can share which screen it's wanting to look at here. Let's do 2. All right, can everybody see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, good. So I just wanted to, again, get started with the transportation presentation. I wasn't sure the type of skill level or how long some of the people in the room have been doing their job. So I wanted to just kind of scratch the surface like I do with all of the presentations that I have, whether they be transportation, student data, ADM, whatever. So with transportation, I wanted to just go over the basics that I do for any of my presentations or trainings. How to get a hold of school finance, definitions and statutes. I'll just kind of scratch the surface on those just to make sure that we're all speaking the same language. We'll talk about the reports. And then I do have I wanted to go over some of the posted COVID related guidance that we have on there as well, because I know that that obviously is on everybody's mind right now. School finance team, again, if you've had a question regarding your routes reports or vehicle inventory, you're going to want to reach out to the school finance team, specifically the school finance account analyst. We're the ones that will help you with the data set of it. If you are in a position where you're looking at the APOR to the payments or budget team. And so the school finance team is actually broken up into 3 little divisions. We've got the account analyst, and we're more data driven, the payments team, and then the budgets team. So if you have any questions, you'd reach out to any one of the individual teams. The school finance analyst team, we had a shared inbox, and we're actually moving away from that. We're actually moving to more of a ticketing system. For help desk, I have the link there. But if you do call into this school finance main line, you'll get this really long phone. To speak to an analyst, you'd want to choose option 3, and then choose option 3 again to talk to an analyst about transportation. If you do have questions specific to your school or LEA, we'd ask that you submit a ticket via the link that's provided there. I will say that with that, you're going to need what's called an ADE Connect user account. If you don't have that, it's ADE Connect is the new platform where before it was SACE. If you're familiar with that terminology, now it's ADE Connect. You have to have an ADE Connect user account to be able to submit a ticket via that ticketing system. And so I know that for transportation directors, you may not have one because you're simply logging in through your common logon account. So talk to whoever your listed entity administrator is so that they can make sure to assign you an ADE Connect account. The entity administrator within your district is typically a business manager, a data coordinator, a superintendent. Somebody at that level can go ahead and assign that account to you. So they don't even need to contact support unless they're not sure how to do that. So transportation guidance, the guidance that is received is obviously derived from what is in written statutes. So Arizona Revised Statute, and these are all the different statutes that transportation is mentioned in. So if ever you had a question is like, well, where is that written? It's written from statute, and then from there, there's additional guidance that is released based off of that. So posted guidance. So probably around 4 or 5 years ago, school finance actually did a focus group and released with the help of people within the field as well as auditor general and attorney generals and the audit team to post this transportation guidance at the link provided here. So if you are unfamiliar with that guidance, it's a 3-page guidance on how to, on the things that are topics related to transportation. School finance itself, if you've ever navigated to the school finance homepage within the Department of Education's website, has COVID-19 specific guidance for transportation. So if we were to navigate to that screen, you would see ADM related topics, and then transportation has its own drop down. So I'll go over the specific guidance in just a minute. And then within ADE's actual homepage, the main page within the Department of Education, you'll see the posted guidance from administration. And so there's a little bit of information in there in regards to transportation for your leaders. So, but there's not a lot about the specifics of how to accomplish what is in the roadmap. So again, so the posted COVID guidance that I'm going to refer to is specific to what's on the school finance webpage for the COVID guidance. And I wanted to kind of highlight, there's 4 or 5 bulletins within that guidance. And I kind of wanted to highlight each one so that we can go over it because we have had a lot of questions regarding transportation and the closures. So when all of this happened back in March, the superintendent, as well as the legislators, worked to enact the bill that would give a little bit of flexibility given the situation or circumstance that we are in. And as a result of the closures, the House bill outlines that transportation support level, or TSL, that you'll get paid on the higher value for TSL. And so this part has been a little bit confusing, and I'll go over that a little bit in more detail. Your TSL, you're not going to get paid on the lesser value. School finance is going to compare what you've submitted for this current year, fiscal 20, compare it to fiscal year 19, and then for fiscal year 21, I know that's a lot. For fiscal year 21, you'll get paid the higher of the two values between fiscal year 19 and fiscal year 20. So regardless of what happened this year, you're going to get paid the higher value for next year's APOR 55-1. So your transportation support level, or the money that the school receives, which shows on an APOR 55-1, which your CFO or business manager would look at, it's always going to be the higher value. If the LEA, you, the local education agency, didn't use the buses as outlined as the bill, did not use the buses, then we don't want for you to have to go into the routes report and update what's called the estimated miles. So when you go into the application itself within Common Logon, if you didn't use your buses and they've been parked since you've been closed, we don't expect for you to go in and update what you've already submitted back in January. The routes report was due 12 days after your 100th day, which was sometime in January for most LEAs. We wouldn't expect for you to go in and update those estimated miles. What's done is done. I think for the most part, the general sentiment from ADE, the legislators, and the governor's office has been that the schools are held harmless for this year. It has been an insane environment. So that's really the message that we want to portray here. Windows for the route and vehicle inventory opened up in mid-May, so you had an opportunity to start entering that information. Should your vehicles have been parked, you could have started entering the vehicle information at that point. If the buses were used for whatever the reason, to provide educational opportunities for students, to provide lunches. I know that a lot of schools on the West Valleys were delivering lunches to certain neighborhoods, especially in the rural areas. They were delivering homework packets. It definitely was a different environment than any one of us ever expected. Then at that point, we would like for you to update the estimated count miles, and that's where you'll get paid on the higher value for TSL between fiscal year 19 and fiscal year 20 for fiscal year 21. So if you did use your buses, please update the estimated miles so that we have the most accurate information as possible. It is a learning process and a learning curve for us as well. But for right now, the guidance is if you didn't use it, you don't need to do anything. If you did use it, please update your estimated miles. I know that in the past we have had questions about whether or not you can use your white fleet. The white fleet is the vans and the cars as part of your transportation calculation for routes. In normal circumstances, the answer would have been no in what the current guidance is for what is a bus and the definition for how school finance defines a bus. And keeping in mind that school finance has obviously its own definition of what is a bus. And when I first started doing transportation presentations, I had a question of, does a bus actually have to be a certain color yellow? And I was like, what? That is disturbing. strangest question. Come to find out, as I did a little bit more research, I did find out that there's all these different agencies that have their own set of rules. Not only does the Department of Highway Safety have their own rules as far as the buses that you use, your insurance companies have their own guidance, and then school finance adds to the mix. So school finance obviously has a defines what is a route and what is a school bus. So in normal circumstances, the school bus is all of this criteria that school finance determines. And in normal circumstances, your white fleet would not be eligible as a route to include in your vehicle inventory. But in these circumstances here for COVID-19, you can absolutely count that towards your routes. The thing with that though is that if you did use those miles, you'd have to add that to your vehicle inventory. And then I'd imagine next year, depending on how things go for this year, you would have to retire that white fleet vehicle out of the inventory for next year. So we'll see how that goes. I'm sure that as we all learn about what next year is going to look like, because I'm sure that a lot of schools still don't even really have a picture of what that next year is going to look like. There's a lot of discussions of hybrid models and all sorts of fun stuff that I've heard. So we'll see, but for right now, if you did use those vehicles to provide educational opportunities, to deliver lunch, to I've had questions of, I had before where I would contract with the parent because they were I live in a rural area. Prior to this, we've always contracted with this parent to provide transportation for their student. Can I continue to reimburse them because they're coming and bringing, picking up lunch, picking up homework packets, picking up whatever for the student? And the answer to that is absolutely yes. It's an educational opportunity. Again, the department has been very flexible and very understanding on the types of reasons you would your fleet. So what is a route? Again, under normal circumstances, a route, and this is a typical cause for confusion in normal years where a route is a run and a run. And this is where I see a lot of confusion when it comes to the Office of the Auditor General when you get audited by those guys, where you're counting a route as the morning run, the afternoon run, or if you have a middle run. Just make sure that a route is picking up the kid to come to school, taking the kid from school to home. This is another area that we sometimes have questions with is what other route miles, and this one specifically I wanted to point out is summer school. This often gets confused within the application itself with the extended school year. Extended school year is not the same thing as summer school. Extended school year specific to students who have an IEP that specifically states that the student needs to have an extended school year. Summer school, if you're an LEA that does provide summer school for students and transportation for students, that's where those miles would go for regular ed summer school students. And the other one that I wanted to point out that we often get questions on is you're providing transportation for students to go to their CTED classes, or formerly known as JTED classes. So if you are a district that is providing transportation to the EVIT, WestMec, MI, JTED, those guys, make sure that you're accounting for those miles in the other routes miles category. And I'll show you a screenshot of that if you're confused about what I'm talking about there. So the application itself, you can access it via Common Logon or through ADE Connect. Again, if you don't have an ADE Connect application, you'll need one to be able to submit a help desk ticket for the SF analyst team moving forward. The Common Logon application is still available via the school finance main page. The one thing that I will say about this application, though, is that it's very, very old. It's a very old grumpy man, and it doesn't play well with some of the new platforms or engines, web engines. So I recommend do not use Chrome for transportation routes or vehicle inventory because it does not play well. Sometimes you'll find that if you log in, certain buttons don't pop up, or it'll give you some sort of weird error. So please just don't use Chrome on this. Use Internet Explorer, Firefox, Mozilla, one of the other, or obviously Internet Explorer, one of the other browser types besides Chrome, because Chrome doesn't play well with it. So the route reports is broken up into the 3 different categories: your daily route miles, other route miles, and then extended year. So the very first page within the application, if you're new to this, I think that we have a lot of veterans on the phone, so I won't spend a whole lot of time. The application itself is a very generic form. Here is what it looks like. The number of routes, again, run plus run equals route, is where you would enter the value here. The actual miles for anything that you would have submitted for the COVID related miles, if you did use your fleet for educational opportunities, we don't expect that you touch this very first page for actual route miles. It's actually the next page for the estimated. Eligible students, we do get quite a bit of questions on the eligible students. If you've pulled up the transportation guidance within the school finance posted guidance, one of the biggest questions that we get and how we came to this 25-day minimum is, my bus drivers count students every single day. My husband actually used to work part-time as a bus driver, and he used to have those clickers, and he'd bring it home, and I would ask him, what in the world is this thing? And he's like, it's to count my students. So some schools have the card method, some schools have a post-it method, some schools have a tele method. Whatever your method is and how your bus driver is counting your eligible students, that's fine. That's completely up to you. What ADE is asking for is a minimum of a 25-day count for that eligible student count. And so that can be a little bit confusing because some schools do average out over the course of the first 100 days based off of the bus driver count every single day. But at minimum, you have to have 25 days. They do not need to be consecutive days. They can be 25 of the top days of whatever you've picked, as long as they're identifiable days, so that when an auditor comes and says, how did you come to this number? You can say, I picked August 10th, August 30th, whatever day you decided to choose, as long as they're identifiable days. So in this slide, this is when we first released the guidance, this was the biggest question that we had. You could either choose to do 100 days, you could do 25, you could do 30 days, whatever your best practice is for you, just as long as it's a minimum of 25 days. And so here's just kind of a way to illustrate how I'm getting that average writers per day. And so I just chose 25 random days, and average writers per day, I came to 21 students. And so I would just expect to put that eligible student value there under actual miles, and then the same under normal circumstances would hold true for the estimated miles. If I'm 180 days school, I would just estimate at 80% of whatever value I put here. So if I had 100 for estimated, I'd put 80. Given this year, a little bit different. This is where we would expect for you to update the number of daily routes and eligible students. Again, these numbers that you're putting directly impact the transportation support level. The transportation support level equals dollars. If the numbers that you've entered here are higher or lower, whatever number is higher or lower will be considered for the TSL for fiscal year 21. And then other route information, this is the page, and this is what it looks like for the, in the middle of the page there for other route, academic, vocational ed. Vocational ed is where you're entering the JTED or CTED miles in that specific field. And then summer school, if you look at the middle of the page, option 3 for summer school, that's where you're entering summer school for your students that you're providing summer school, not the extended year. And then this one, regardless of you touching anything, whether you've used Fleet for COVID related items or not, please make sure that on the status page that that little ridiculous tiny little box is checked. If that box isn't checked, and the same holds true for vehicle routes and vehicle inventory, that if that box isn't checked, it's not going to submit the information over to the payments team so that they can calculate what they need for you. So that is very, very important to make sure that that tiny, tiny little ridiculous box is checked. So if you haven't touched your information since January, you should expect that it should still be checked. But I would still go in there and just double check and create the Trans 55-1. And then once you're entering your vehicle inventory, continue to submit the or create the 40-2 report for the comparative miles. When I talk about, and I know that sometimes even coming from a student data level, I'm in the actual weeds of the reports itself. The student counts reports that I often refer to, or the APOR reports that I refer to, are a public report that is public facing. So if you've never had to look at these reports, they are on the school finance website under reports. And then each one of your reports are generated here. So you'll see this school then generated their Trans 55-1. And from that Trans 55-1 is how the value for next year's TSL are going to be used on the APOR. The Trans 51 is exactly just the same information that you submitted within the common login application for eligible students. And then next year for your APOR 55, that's the value that for this specific school, it was 1,900 students that was taken from that value and then shoved onto the APOR. This is what I'm talking about when I'm saying that whatever the higher value is for fiscal year 19 and fiscal year 20 will be used for fiscal year 22. 21. I'm jumping ahead. I just want 20 to be over with. And then again, I just wanted to just reconfirm, because that has been the biggest question and the biggest point, I think, of panic, to make sure that if you are estimating and you are a lot lower this year, that you're going to obviously get paid the higher value. Reporting deadlines, things were a little bit different again this year. We reopened the routes report and vehicle inventory in mid-May. So if you haven't already submitted that information for your vehicle inventory, the windows are already open. And then we did go ahead and just open as a statewide the routes report so that you can update should you need to do that. The windows for both applications closed July 15th. So you still have a little bit of time if you haven't already done that. And then just make sure that you check the status page and generate your reports for vehicle inventory, because that's the new one that was open just recently. And that's all I had. I can't see if there's questions anywhere, so I just kind of blew right through that.
All right, I'll bring the questions back in. So
Okay.
So one of the questions, if buses sat, so obviously school went into closure, but then vans were used. How would we estimate or update those miles just for the vans? You know, we had those vans that we used were for student transportation already. We use a small fleet to move McKinney-Vento students. So those vans were used for food deliveries and curriculum deliveries. So how do I separate those two apart from the buses sitting in the lot, but updating the miles to be included to capture the miles that we drove during that time? Or is it negligible?
So was the vans that you were using already in vehicle inventory?
Correct. Right. So typically I have things separated and broken apart where I report everything together. But because of, like I said, we're now using them for food or curriculum deliveries. I want the buses sat. So I'm not, you're telling me that I don't need to do anything with the school buses, but I need to figure out how to update the estimated mileage, because we wouldn't have driven as many miles as we would have if school was in session moving students, but we still captured miles for food deliveries. Or should we just leave it alone?
You should try to put the most, as close as you can get to what actually happened. and update the vehicle inventory, the odometer readings just for the white fleet, because that will obviously change. You want the most accurate odometer readings, what's in there for vehicle inventory, because that's going to affect next year inventory. We don't, because that's going to be the starting value for men. Just, I mean, entering what you have and try to enter on the estimated routes miles what you actually did from March to end of school year.
So really, I'm just adjusting, I guess, that McKinney-Vento section for more or
For
less
those,
because that's what I'm using for. I use the vans in a different realm, but I don't. I guess there's not a way to capture like COVID-19 miles, right?
there is not. It's not pretty. The application wasn't pretty to begin with, and then we added
Sure.
this to the mix. So honestly, just document what you can. Try to get as accurate as you can, and I mean, really, that's all we can expect
Got it.
from that.
So Joan from Jail Combs had a question just about is the inventory report going to be open until July 15th, which I think you answered. She's getting some new buses. Sounds like they just purchased. Did she need to do anything else with the vehicle inventory report? They did not use any vehicles since March.
No, so she wouldn't have to. Well, not true. The vehicle inventory, make sure that you are putting those ending odometer miles, because that value is going to carry on for next year, be your starting odometer reading. So you want to make sure that at minimum from March or mid-March, whenever it is that everything shut down, that you have that ending value in there. And we fully anticipate for the 40-2 to show that variance of miles. So we had a couple questions where when you do go to click the vehicle inventory, you'll see that red value of like, you have got a, ridiculous, you're off. Don't let the red text scare you. We're fully aware that things are going to be off for this year. So continue to put your odometer readings, because that will affect next year's starting readings.
Got it. I had a question. I think there was talk about a new platform being created. Is that still being worked on, or did it kind of get scrapped?
Good question. So yes, that is actually still being worked on. I'm not sure on the roadmap where they are for that. We had started it mid last year to kind of start to gather requirements for that application. I know that it hasn't been on anything that I don't know if Irene is still on the line. Maybe she has a little bit more information that she can share. But one of the things that we did want to make sure to include is people from the field. So if that is something that you are interested, maybe you can reach out to Jason and then we can gather a list together, because one of the things that we did want to do is include the people from the field as far as what things we can change within the application to make it a little bit more clear. Because I'm certainly not a transportation expert. I always get new questions every year where I'm like, wow, I didn't expect that at all. So yeah, if that's something that you're interested in, absolutely, we can make sure to include your feedback.
Yeah, Irene's still in here. Go ahead, Irene.
Hey there. So it is included as part of our new payment system that's currently being worked on by Lyle and our new DAS, Charlie Martin, and a whole slew of people in our IT department and ADOA. The conversations are ongoing. The thought process is to have the entire new payment system up and running over the next few years. I'm not sure where exactly this piece falls in that. So let me get a feel from them and we can get back to you on that.
Cool. Thank you. Joan had another question. I have a high school run, elementary run, and a junior high school run in the AM and the same in the PM. Would that count as 3 routes or 6 routes?
The high school kids, are you picking up elementary and junior kids in that same run?
No, it sounds like they're separate runs. I would assume you said a run or run plus a run equals a route.
Mm-hmm.
So my assumption of that is that it's one route that comprises 6 runs, 3 in the morning and 3 in the afternoon. Is that correct?
it's my understanding from based off of the question, that's 3 different routes. You've got your high school route, you're picking up high school kids, driving them, picking them up, dropping them off, and then kids, right?
Yeah. So, but again, when we're talking about the that portal that we're putting the information into, the common logon portal, it asks us how many routes that we have. So as it's not asking for how many runs we have, it's asking for how many routes we have. Is that correct? So in this case, you would
Right.
have 3 runs in the morning and 3 runs in the afternoon, but it's one route that makes up those 3 routes, or 3 runs make up a route. Is that correct?
No, I think it's 3 separate routes: a high school route, a middle school route, and an elementary route.
Hmm.
Because it's not the same. It's not the same kids, right? On each run.
Correct.
I think
Yeah,
our
so
assumption would be that they're picking them up separately, is it not?
They are picking them up separately. Correct.
so it's 3 different routes.
So your comment about a run plus a run equals a route, what does that mean?
So pick up in the morning, take home in the afternoon.
Got it.
1 group of kids.
Okay.
I see some heads nodding. That's how I would do it. I mean, that's how I would be able to explain it to the auditor. Like, I picked up this same group of kids in the morning, dropped off the same group of kids. That's a run in the morning, 1 group, run in the afternoon, 1 group of kids.
Okay. Next question from Amy Linflot. If we are not updating estimated miles, our inventory report is not going to accept the mileage because the estimate will be higher? Question mark. So we're not updating our 80-day
Yes.
miles, but inventory report is changing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously if you didn't use your fleet and you're still entering your odometer readings are obviously going to be what you estimated is going to be higher because your buses have been sitting. Absolutely, yeah, you're going to have that variant. So when you go to generate the 40-2, the comparative, that's what I was talking about. You may get that red font like warning, you're off. So don't let that red font scare you. We're aware that things are going to be a little bit crazy this year.
Okay. I think we may have hit Brian's question, but I'm going to ask it anyways. If we did use buses, vehicles in our inventory report for food delivery, we should go back and adjust our estimated miles. And what's the value? The miles that equal the inventory report, actual miles, and record it in what category? So where would they put that?
So if you did use your fleet for the vehicle for educational opportunities or food, you would enter in the estimated miles and update the routes.
Okay. Next question. I'm not able to view past year's reports. How am I able to access them?
If you need previous year reports to view them, you can either do the student counts website that I was showing you just a bit ago. If they were not generated and pushed to the public facing portal, just reach out to the team and we can make sure to get those for you.
Got it.
Yeah, the moment you hit those blue buttons, it immediately pushes out to the public facing portal. So if you push that button 20 times, it'll generate 20 reports. So if that button to generate the 55, the 40-2, the 03, if they were never pushed for previous years and you're the new director this year, just give us a call and we'll try to help you figure out what happened.
So I'll ask this question just because some may not have asked this before, but typically if this was a typical year, we would go and put our vehicle inventory reports here in the next couple weeks. We'd get everything scored away, but sometimes there's a variance, like a fairly large mileage variance between what we estimated and what the vehicle inventory report is reporting, say 50,000 miles potentially.
Mm-hmm.
What are we supposed to do as far as reconciling that or going back and trimming that so that we're not being necessarily overpaid for miles that we didn't drive?
So that's a good question. So typically, since that estimated portion is due in January, and say your football team did great, and you're driving them statewide, and you're doing more miles than you anticipated, or things changed and you had a bus um, that needed to be retired because it broke down, and you had to readjust your routes, so you have less miles coming out of that. So then in the estimated portion, when we open up the vehicle inventory, you can certainly request from the SF analyst team to open up your routes in a normal year, so that you can update the estimated miles, so that there's not that huge variance. Also, 50,000 miles, it depends if you're, I don't know, J.O. Combs or are you Mesa? So it just really depends on how big of your school, and it's got a huge fleet and they cover lots of miles. Um, so it really depends on the business model.
Is there typically a number that you guys or the auditor general would be looking for? I mean, we're not trying to get it to zero so that it's equal, but is there something that would be a generalized
Like a
targeted number?
percentage, like
Yeah, like it's a number saying, man, okay, I'm within this variable, I'm good here, or that's too high of a number or too much of a difference that I need to go back and make some adjustments.
no, I mean, there's no general rule of thumb as far as the estimated, like the variance. I wish that there was, because that would make it a little bit easier. You always want to make sure, though, that that your paperwork and your system can account for what is there. What is there is what is there, and I mean, as long as you can attest to that, absolutely, we don't want you fibbing the numbers or changing it so that you're not showing a huge variance. But unfortunately, there's not really a rule of thumb, because then it would kind of create that fibbing, just to bring that percentage within a ratio.
Sure. Any other questions from anybody else? None? All right, Monica. Well, I appreciate your time and your staff to be here, and hopefully, I think what we may reach out to you in the near future to see if you want to do a YouTube session offline that we can present again to our group, but and hopefully get you guys back up in Flagstaff with us next June, assuming that everything goes as planned. So
Yeah.
again, thank you for your time. I think it's been very informational and kind of getting everybody on the same track, because I think we all hear different things, and I'm guilty as well, right? We all interpret things and do our own ideas of how this is supposed to go. So hearing it from our people at ADE is very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will just say again, if you have questions that you're unsure of, I know that it's very important to have that relationship with your peers. But if you keep getting the same question from your peers over and over, at that point, it's definitely time to make sure that we're aware of those kind of questions. Because, I mean, with all the good intentions that we have, we're trying to write this guidance and we're trying to make it as clear as possible. But then when it comes out to the field, sometimes we have people scratching their head like, what are you saying? And then because we have peers talking to peers, it never gets to us. And then we're thinking everything's fine. And then, come to find out like, well, this has been like this for years. And the same holds true for the student data world. Sometimes we have schools where we're like, well, I just created a workaround. It's like, don't do that. We want to know that there's a problem. So please absolutely ask your questions, because it helps us provide more clear guidance, and it lets us know where we're falling short on training and opportunities to learn and provide clear guidance. So absolutely reach out to us if you have a question, even if you're asking it. Because sometimes we didn't even know it was an issue.
Sure. All righty. Well, we'll give everybody just about, what do we got? 10, 15 minutes before the next session will start at 2:50. We have HR documentation and best practices with Dr. Barbara Remendini, and we have White Fleet preparedness and training, another topic that's been coming out about how to get everybody trained in White Fleet and making sure that those coaches and teachers and everybody using White Fleet is good to go. So that starts at 2:50, and that will be the last session for the day. The next session starts tomorrow after that, 8:30 in the morning, with Department of Public Safety, and Jennifer Iverson will be doing a presentation in the morning. So if I don't see folks, have a great afternoon. Thank you for attending, and thank you to Monica and her team, and we'll sign it off from here. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your help.